Hello everyone, welcome back to the course. So this video presentation is about the protection and security offered by operating system along with different kinds of computing environments like traditional distributed web-based computing as well as embedded computing along with the description of or the list of open source operating systems available. I'm Mrs. Archana Priyadarshini, Assistant Professor in the Department of ISC, Canara Engineering College. So let's talk about protection and security. Defining the term protection, it's a mechanism for controlling the access of processes or users to the resources defined by the computer system. This mechanism provides means to specify the controls to be imposed. This protection actually provides or it improves the reliability by detecting latent errors at the interfaces between the components of systems. So, in order to, we must ensure that the system has adequate protection, but anyways, it can be still prone to failures. Say, for example, user whose authentication information is stolen. So, you can see that her data will be copied or deleted, or even though the file and memory protection is working, and it is the job of the security to defend a system from external and internal attacks, right? So let's come to the definition of security. That is the defense of the system that protects against internal and external attacks. So for example, user identities may be stolen, or user ID including its associated files may be lost. Group ID is used to it actually allows a set of users to be defined and controls are managed. So most of the operating system must encounter that it maintains a list of usernames along with their IDs. So that user ID will be associated with all of the user processes and threads, right? So whenever an ID needs to be user readable, it is translated back to the username through the username list. So in some cases, we need to distinguish between the set of users rather than individual users. So for example, owner of the file in a Unix system may be allowed to issue all the operations on that file. In that case, you need to identify the group owner. So we have also got another facility called as the group identifier to distinguish among the set of users. So user can be in more than one groups, right? And depending upon the operating system design, there is a certain restriction given that user group IDs are also included in every processes and threads. So in the course of the normal use of the system, the user ID and group ID for a user is sufficient. However, sometimes they need to escalate the privileges to gain extra permissions for an activity. So, for example, the user's access to a particular device may be restricted, and there will be several methods provided by the operating system to allow privilege escalation. So, you may have seen setuid attribute for that. So, which causes the program to run with the user ID of the owner of the file rather than just the user's ID. Let's see some of the computing environments. The first computing environment is traditional computing. So, as the computing matures, we have got different lines of traditional computing environments. You can observe that in a typical office environment, this environment usually consisted of PCs connected to a network with the servers providing all file and print services. And remote access was just awkward, and portability was achieved by the use of laptop computers. There were terminals, and these were attached to the mainframes. And the companies used to establish or they used to provide web accessibility with the help of portals. They are called portals, and with this facility, they used to provide web accessibility to the servers. And network computers are essentially the terminals and which actually understand web-based computing. So when you compare this kind of network or in a home, most users will be having a single computer with slow modem connection to the office or internet. Today, network connection speeds they are available at great cost and they are relatively inexpensive. They give users more access to more data, and these fast data connections they allow home computers to serve up the web pages. And they some homes even have got firewalls to protect their networks from security breaches. And today, traditional time sharing systems are uncommon. Time sharing system means they use a particular timer and scheduling algorithms to cycle the processes through the CPU, wherein each user is given some portion of time and they are allowed to use the resources. Next, we will be talking about distributed computing. So, in this kind of distributed computing, it is a collection of physically separate, heterogeneous computer systems that are networked to provide the users with access to various resources. So, there will be separate computers. They are possibly heterogeneous computer. They have got different databases. Each one has its own database memory, and they are networked to provide users with the access to various resources. So the access to the shared resources increase computation speed and functionality, data availability and reliability. So a network means it's a communication path between two or more systems. When we talk about network, we can have LAN, that is local area network. See all these networks they are characterized based on the distance between the nodes. So local area network it operates within a room, floor or building and it serves a few points. Next network is a wide area network which usually links buildings, cities or countries, quite global than LAN. The next network is WAN, that is that we have talked about is wide area network which usually links buildings, cities. And more broadly, we can talk about metropolitan area network which could link buildings within cities. Most often the Bluetooth and 802.11 kind of devices they use wireless technology to communicate over a distance of several feet in a small area network. And some users they use a personal area network. So network operating system they provide features between the systems across the network, and that includes communication scheme which allows different processes on different computers to exchange messages. So some of the operating system they use this kind of concept, network operating system. They allow with this kind of system there is a file sharing between the different computers. They can exchange the messages. It's like illusion of a single system. So the system gets all the facilities required. A distributed operating system they provide less autonomous environment. It is because different operating systems communicate closely to provide that kind of illusion that only a single operating system controls the network. So here we can observe the need for distributed computing. What happens without distributed computing? So each and when the request is sent, you get a response, right? And for each process, it has to serve the request. Whereas, for if we use a kind of distributed system, it can be shared. Okay, the same thing, same kind of request can be shared to multiple users simultaneously. The time is saved there when compared to the systems without the distributed facility. So here also you can observe a kind of distributed systems wherein a system requests for a particular instruction to be served by different banks. So if the data isn't found in one particular bank, it is searched through the next bank. So there is a network of servers which provides information to us. So all the banks are connected using a loosely connected system but a tightly coupled software. The data is being distributed and in full terms of consistency. So in this way, if one bank fails, another bank is able to retrieve the data because the same copy of the data is available in several banks and one can get the request back. So that's the basic advantage of distributed system.
So next we'll be moving to client server computing. It consists of two major components, that is clients and servers. So the system is structured as a set of processes called servers and that offer services to the users. There is a set of processes called servers and these servers are responsible for offering services to the users. So these are called clients. The server systems, once again, they are divided into compute servers and file servers. So, what are these? What is compute server system? That is, it provides an interface to which a client can send a request to perform an action. So, here client will send a request for required to perform some service by the server, and the server will respond for some operation and send the results back to the client. So, server will contain a database, right? So the next type of servers that is in consideration is file server system. The client can perform various operations like create, read, update and delete file on the file server. So here all the operations of file can be performed with the help of file server, and one best example that we can give for file server system is a web server. So here the client can send a request, server will compute the calculations and send the response back to the client. And once again, it's like a to and fro interaction between the client and server. So this kind of model is based on simple request or reply protocol. So basically, you might have heard about RPC, remote procedure calls. So this it follows this kind of strategy. So here, basically, the client will send a request message to the server asking for some service, and the server does the work and returns the result back. Maybe possibly the error code or correct result acknowledgement given to the client. So server is a process, and client again is a process. In between decides the protocols for transmission. So the clients can invoke the servers and servers will send the results to the clients. The servers can be once again the clients of other servers. Okay, it's like client will send a request to the server and server can send the response back to the client. And once again, this server can act as a client to another server. So clients can invoke the servers and servers send the results and once again servers can be the clients for other servers. So one example is a web server or HTTP server is a server process, right, to the client process. So client process is like a web browser. Okay, web browser through web browser client sends the request and that response is being served by the server with the help of databases and other big servers and then send the result back to the client in terms of a web page display. So HTTP server may be the client of a database server and service may be provided by multiple servers. One basic advantage of this kind of model or this client server kind of computing is it is simple to implement. Just we need RPC or remote procedure calls and it provides good security because all the files are stored in a central location. So here you can observe the kind of interaction that happens between the client and various servers. So there is an application server which will serve the request from the client in terms of an intranet with the help of intranet or internet any other network connection.
The request has been sent with the help of the browsers to the application server, and the application server will contact different database servers available. So this kind of communication, you can observe it very clearly. There's a kind of a socket program. This is a kind of socket program wherein the client performs the socket, and then it sends different parameters for binding the connection. Then it starts initiating the connection with the help of RPC, remote procedure calls, and there will be several send and receive functions. And during the bind process, it is going to bind the connections, end-to-end connections. And once the link is connected, both the servers and both the client and server are in connection, and they can send and receive the response simultaneously. You can observe in the server there is a listen function and there's an accept function, and simultaneously both the client and server can send and receive the messages. And once the communication is done, they can close off the connections. So this kind of program is nothing but socket programming, which serves the client server computing strategy. So next kind of computing environment is a peer-to-peer system. Here, each of the process they play a similar role. It is they do not require any kind of master-slave kind of strategy. They all follow same road. Maybe all of them act as a servers or all of them act as a clients. That is, they do not require any server process. Process interact without any distinction between the clients and the servers. So this is a pattern of communication from one peer, and the communication goes to another peer or another peer and so on like that. So either all of them will act as a client or all of them may act as a servers, but each perform their similar kind of functionality. So the nodes must join in a peer-to-peer network. So a network must be formed wherein the nodes can communicate, and there will be large number of data objects which are shared. And individual computer holds small part of the application database. So here a group of computers connected together to combine their computing and processing abilities to search the internet. So what are the major problems with the peer-to-peer is high complexity due to retrieval of the objects. So they can cleverly place the individual objects as well as maintain potential large number of replicas. So there will not be any single point of failure as in client and server, wherein the data will be sent from the client to the server, and then there will be a kind of master connection who will initiate or terminate the connection. There is no such kind of master slave in peer to peer. And there is as you observed in client server programming, there is a single point of failure. But here, since all of the nodes act as peers, that means all of them act as clients or all of them may act as the servers, there is no single point of failure. And peer-to-peer doesn't have any rules of client or server. So one example is voice over IP such as Skype. So anybody can initiate the connection, and there is no master or slave kind of connections or roles in case of Skype. In this particular slide, you can observe a server-based network and a peer-to-peer based network. In a server-based network, wherein there are clients listening to the response from the server, that is, there is a central node which is responsible for responding to the request given by different clients. So there is a central network or the central node. If the central node fails, all the clients it's they won't receive any response from that particular node, right? So whereas in a peer-to-peer network, you can observe the it is like each one has a copy of the data. If any client wants to retrieve the data, it can access any server or any client, okay? And if that client is unable to get the request once again, since it is interconnected and all the data is available in all the nodes, the same data can be fetched from other nodes. So there is no single point of failure in peer-to-peer based network.
So here let us see some of the special purpose systems. The first special purpose system is the real-time OS. And apart from this, we have got other handheld systems. The real-time OS, it by the word meaning that it means that there are time constraints. So this is the key parameter for any real-time system. That is, the system must perform within the specified time interval. If not, it is a failure. So these real-time systems they vary from special purpose to limited purpose OS. Limited means it works only for some cause or for some specific application. So these time constraints is the important parameter in such systems, and it controls these kind of systems. They are basically used in autonomous systems like robots, satellites, air traffic control systems. And once again, if we try to classify this real-time system, it may be of two types. One is hard real-time and soft real-time. And whenever user gives an input to the system, it must process within the time limit, and the result must be sent back. So it is called as a real-time system if it does not do this task. That is, if it does not perform within the specified time interval, then it is said to be a failure. In such case, does not give the result within the time limits. So as I've told, there are two types in this real-time system, that is hard real-time and soft real-time. So in case of soft real-time, there it is less restrictive type. That is, soft real-time means we cannot guarantee that it will be able to meet the deadline under all conditions. One example is digital telephone and digital audio. So they'll have certain conditions to which they will work on, right? And some deadlines may be met. That is soft real time. There is no hard bound rule for the time restrictions in case of soft real time systems. Okay, and in case of hard real time, there are very strict bounds. Hard real time. That is, it is very critical, and task has to be completed within the time limit. And if there is any delay, some processing must be done, or some kind of computation must be done so as to fix that particular time drawback. And all of the general purpose operating system, they it does not support hard real time system. Any real time task cannot keep waiting for longer time interval also. So processing must be done within the strict time constraint, that is in hard real time systems. So what kind of algorithm do these kind of system use? Can you realize when you just think over the scheduling algorithm that real time OS uses is basically priority scheduling. If there are n number of tasks, which task has got the first priority? That must be executed first. So based on the priority, the real-time operating system works. So therefore, they use a priority-based scheduling algorithm in order to meet the response requirement. We can give many examples like air traffic control systems. See, for this particular line, okay, the traffic is busy, so it has a signal being generated. So it works on real-time environments and based on the environment conditions. So these are some of the examples of real-time system like air traffic control systems or maybe petroleum or paper mill. So it works based on the environment. And next is burglar alarm system. Okay, and then we can also have a autopilot shuttle machine simulator. So all these are examples of real-time operating system where memory management is less demanding, more importance given to time. So here you can see all the major application areas of embedded systems. So embedded systems, why I'm telling this is this because for some particular applications it has to work within the time bound. For example, cam recorders or television or DVD player, television. Okay, if that signal is not forecasted for that particular time interval, the system this the system itself may fail. Or yeah, in case of major constraints happens in washing machine,
fridge. So if it does not work, so the entire system is a failure. So all some kind of embedded system, they have got strict timing constraints. When if they not work, the entire system goes on to a failure. And the third kind of system is home automation system, security systems. This is very important. Fire alarm system. So if it does not give the alarm at that particular time interval, there is a security threat. So in such cases, the hard real time bound is displayed, right? And the fourth one is automotive industry in anti-lock braking systems, engine control systems or ignition control systems, as well as in cellular telephones. So all these are the areas of embedded systems, and most of the uh, most of them, almost all, will use the real-time operating system. And in this, once again, they can be classified into hard real-time or soft real-time, respectively. So here you can observe one important example. Here I am taking a washing machine. It is a kind of control program, and in each part of the segments, or in each part of the segments, there is a control function embedded here. So for why we call this as an embedded programming kind of system is it is designed to perform a specific task specific to the washing or rinse or fall or heating. Okay, all these are specific tasks related to the purpose of getting the clothes washed. So there is one specific goal, and it is meant to serve that particular goal. It is a kind of embedded system, right? So here if you try to visualize the state diagram or finite state machine diagram, these are the different states through which it goes through. First of all, it begins in the ready state, and once the all the facilities that are in the sense of the door is closed and all the all the initiative things are done, then start filling the water. Gets, well, if it's timed out, means it's a fault, or else if it's full, if the water is full, it starts heating up the water and then starts washing. Okay, if it's out of balance, it obviously you can observe there is a um, failure in its operation. So once the wash is completed, if its function is done, then it moves on to the rinse phase. And after rinsing, it goes to the spin phase. Okay, during the spin, there are chances that the motor may fail. Such case, it results in a fault, or else you can find these machine in a disrupted state. So once the spin is completed, then finally it comes back in the stop state, or else you can say that it will be highlighting in the beginning state. You can again rerun the washing machine. Okay, this is the kind of state diagram which we have which represents a washing machine control program, where in real time it has to work within a particular time interval. If not, the system will fail. So the previous special purpose system that we have already considered is the real time operating system, and we have also considered the example of a washing machine. The next kind of special purpose system is a handheld system. So we can give the best example, that's your mobile phone, wherein the physical size is the main constraint. What if you want much more resolution? It requires more power. So the handheld system, they contain slow processor, a small display, and a less memory. So these are the basic characteristics. They usually we can say the maximum memory supported by these kind of systems is 8 MB, and that is the range we have given here. 512 GB to 8 MB. The maximum memory is 8 MB. So the operating system must manage all the applications, including the memory, more efficiently in such slow processor, in such small display, and less memory. So must take care of allocating as well as deallocating the memory, and the processor speed is limited because of the power supply. So many handheld devices, they do not use virtual memory techniques. That's why we have they have limited to a very small physical memory. The operating system used nowadays for handheld devices BlackBerry. Nowadays they are using BlackBerry as well as Android for handheld devices, including Windows too. And keeping into mind the display screen for such a device is very critical. So if the user, you see, usually user wants bigger screen, that means it consumes lot of space, and keyboard obviously is within the screen itself. It's called touch screen board keyboard, and when if the keyboard is not used that time, it will be used for the display screen. So these kind of devices, they support wireless technology like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi connectivity. So these are the major wireless technologies that are supported by handheld devices. So if you want to connect it to another handheld system, basically it is done through Bluetooth facility. And users have also the option to transfer any files, audio or video through the Bluetooth. So in this kind of computing environment, it is web-based computing. Most previously they had used one small source of internet through the LAN cable. The connections were done, and the sender and the recipient used to send the messages and access the data over the internet. But as the technology progressed, different the web technology also uses traditional computing, but moreover when we talk about web based computing, this has increased the emphasis on networking. So web-based computing, see, usually there will be a client and web server. Client asks for the request, and HTML request will be sent to the web server, wherein there is a construction technology business logic. So based on these properties, the server is going to respond to the request of the client within the browser. So this is purely emphasis is based on networking. So these kind of computings, they are used in PCs as well as handheld devices and cell phones. So one of the important feature of this kind of computing is regarding load balancing. So in load balancing, the network connection is distributed among the pool of similar servers. So there will be several servers who have the same data, and the request is being sent to the servers, and date and response is obtained from any one of the servers. So the main emphasis is on networking, creating a pool of all the networks connected between the clients and servers.
So talking about the third kind of computing environment, or we can say its fourth kind of computing environment called as embedded computing. Embedded means it is a combination of hardware, software along with real-time operating system. So major component is real-time operating system, and the application of these kind are used in car engines as well as robots, when they have to manufacture robots to VCRs, and also it is used in microwave ovens. So where the real time constraints matters, that is, these type of system provides limited features. They are served to serve a particular application. For example, mobile computing refers to computing on handheld smartphones. So these devices will share the physical features like being portable, lightweight, and so on. There are these are specific to a particular application. That's why they are called embedded system. It can be independent or it can be a part of the larger system. So here let's talk about the open source operating system. By the term meaning open source, it refers to the program in which the source code of the program written by a programmer can be modified.
and it is sold for general public for either modification. So you can see some of the examples of open source. Coming to the application software, we have also seen 7-Zip, Chromium, Mozilla Firefox, OpenOffice. All these are open source codes or open source softwares. And coming to the operating system point, Android, Linux, React OS, FreeDOS, FreeBSD, all are open source. The code itself is open to the public, and anybody can modify and design their own operating system. So, unlike you can observe the closed operating system like Windows, wherein the code can only be altered by Microsoft, right? And only few customers like great companies they can work with this kind of operating system modification, and they can also try to fix the bugs that underlie the source code. So, at the heart of the most open source operating system is the Linux kernels. Basically, because of the Linux kernel, these provides the core of the operating system, and the kernel it interacts with the computer's hardware. So, operating system makers build the tools that plug into the Linux kernel in order to create the operating system. So the Free Software Foundation they also say that how much of the open source operating system like Linux they also borrow from the GNU OS and its tools. So we have got open source operating systems that aren't based on Linux, like FreeBSD, which is a free operating system, and it dates back to Unix operating systems that is not built on Linux kernel. We have got FreeBSD, which is not based on Linux kernel. It is based on Unix operating system. So you can also look into the programming languages which are open source like Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby, Prolog as a part of the open source code.